Today's episode is brought to you by Fly Sheridan, operated by SkyWest Airlines. Save time, fly local, fly Sheridan. They have a newly remodeled terminal and construction for additional parking underway. Sheridan is quickly becoming one of the busiest airports in the region. Book your direct flight to Denver today via united.com. Fly Sheridan. So we're recording, Glenn, and we're live too. So if we get anybody commenting or anything, we'll see if we can get some get some questions. So thanks for taking the time for a Friday afternoon. I know we were just saying off air that you've had a busy 2021, and I imagine 2022 is just going to be even busier for you. So I appreciate you sitting back down with us and talk about Wyoming and energy.
You bet. It's great to be back, Aaron. I really enjoyed the first round we went through this, whenever it was, a year ago already, I think.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting year with lots of things going on. So it's good to be back chatting about energy. So yeah, let's have at it. And then excuse the casual look, right? We had the winter storm. I had to work from home, and it's Friday afternoon anyway.
Yeah.
So you're lucky I don't have a beer in front of me. I can guarantee it's only water.
We're not a PG show, so if you're drinking a beer, that's okay. We used to have some whiskey in our studio in our old place, so that's perfectly fine. So, I want to start right off the bat. The last time you were on, two things we talked about that I think kind of are coming to fruition a little bit in 2022 is, infrastructure. How can Wyoming better its infrastructure to export energy? And then of course, we kind of hit on nuclear power. I'm trying to recall. I'm pretty sure we've got kind of some big infrastructure. I don't want to say projects. I don't know if they're finalized, but we've got some good ideas kind of rolling right now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the infrastructure side of it.
Yeah. So yeah, the answer is you're right. It's a massive amount of work going on. And maybe if I back up and I can't remember if we talked about this last time, Aaron, or not, but we spent a lot of time at the end of 2020, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the work that I had to do getting started here was to build the energy strategy, right? Which we talked about at the time was net zero and CCUS and hydrogen and things like that. And that got rolled out in the early part of 2021. It's been interesting, especially we started traveling in the second half of last year, going to different conferences and other things. That Wyoming's being watched, not creepy way, but it's being watched in terms of how a very traditional energy economy that characterizes the energy economy of Wyoming has taken a position to try and transform itself in a way that continues to stay relevant and sustainable in the future that's going to be defined by increasing demand for low emissions energy. So that's been interesting to watch that. And if you look at most of the development potential in Wyoming currently, or not potential, the bulk of the development projects that are getting kicked around, they all seem to associate with that transformative view. So there's certainly the traditional drilling programs that are happening in the Powder River Basin and elsewhere, for example, and ongoing developments of natural gas fields elsewhere and things like that. But all of the green growth, the green shoots that are coming through typically fall on this sort of transformative vision, right? So which is really exciting. So there are several, I can tell you let's start with the three big initiatives, right? First of all, yep. CCUS. We just closed. In fact, we have our approval session next week on the CCUS request for proposals that was appropriated to us during the last session. We were appropriated $10 million from the legislature to incentivize CCUS build out.
And real quick, for anyone that doesn't know what that is, that's
so the legislature in the during the session earlier this year, they appropriated $10 million from the LISRA, the long-term the reserve account, to support carbon capture, utilization, and storage build out within the state.
Yeah,
and it pretty broad. It was not just capture; it was also sequestration. There were other things there. And we just closed that request for proposals. We closed it a while ago. We've gone through the selection process and we have the approval mechanism next week. And we received 17 proposals to that RFP. And everything from, there were multiple sequestration hubs. So the concept of having commercially developed sequestration facilities in the state. There were traditional, amine-based post-combustion capture and thermal plants. There was post-combustion projects. There were some very innovative, let's say, non-traditional CCUS projects as well. And the total, project book was something in the order of $300 to $400 million of projects under development, just with that context, right?
Awesome.
So it's a massive amount of interest and momentum in that space, and it's very exciting to be aware of it and following things. I just wish some of them would make big announcement, and I think that's going to happen soon. There will be some big announcements.
Good.
Then there was hydrogen, and we had a hydrogen request for proposals out earlier this year. We've funded 2 of those. One is a project with Black Hills in the Cheyenne region to co-fire one of their gas turbines with hydrogen. Another one is with Williams companies in the southwest of Wyoming to test their export capabilities and various other aspects associated with hydrogen development out there. So there's a lot of build out that way. Now you talk about infrastructure. Let's talk about specifics, right? There's the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure thingamajiggy.
Yeah, whatever it's called now. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it's called. $1.2 gazillion and I think it's 1.2 trillion, I think, right, out of DC. And if you pay close attention to that bill, there are literally dozens of programs that are coming out that will be prime for Wyoming to go after. Everything from large pilot scale carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects to deployment scale carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects. There are direct air capture projects. There are hydrogen hubs that have been developed. And the list just goes on and on and on. And that's only the energy industry. That doesn't count for all the other infrastructure pieces in there. So, and many of them a lot of those programs are written in the context of again, that transformative vision, right? Not just building out the same old thing, but how do you take energy to the future? So that is perfectly set up really for alignment with the Wyoming energy strategy, and we're doing the best we can simply to hold on at the moment because we don't have the bandwidth even to follow what's coming out of DC currently. So we're gonna hire grant writers and everything else so that we can do it. So that is where it's all coming together. Tons of effort there, and it's a massive opportunity. Somebody said it was once in a generation opportunity. And then they were corrected and told it's more like a once every Halley's Comet sort of opportunity. So it's huge, it's enormous, and it really it has the potential to transform Wyoming entirely, and in terms of its industrial base. Then the third piece is nuclear. Yeah, and when we were speaking about it earlier, Aaron, advanced nuclear reactors were in the energy strategy, but they certainly didn't have a priority. There certainly wasn't an initiative about it because there was no obvious sort of opportunity there. It was more of a strategic thing that this would make sense if it happened, but we were not expending a lot of effort on it because we had other things to do.
Right.
Then, as you know, TerraPower came out with the partnership with PacifiCorp and DOE to build whatever it is, $4 billion test reactor, advanced reactor system out. At the time, it was somewhere in Wyoming. It has since been announced that it's in Kemmerer and associated with the Norton power station. And that elevated the priority of that opportunity enormously for us. We cannot let that one go by. So that is now the third initiative at the state level, at the Energy Authority level, of the big three that we're going after and doing everything we can to promote and develop. And the interesting thing about that is that, there was nobody in Wyoming really knew what advanced reactors were about. We've had a tremendous relationship and development with Idaho National Labs, and they've helped us understand that the opportunity is much larger than it looks like at face value. It's not just a reactor. It's not just electrons. It is fuel cycle value chains, manufacturing value chains, low emissions or zero emissions, carbon-based products, things like that is really where the massive potential actually lies. So it's a very steep learning curve. We're doing the best we can to understand that opportunity as well, but it's incredibly exciting. And it aligns with what we're trying to do at the energy strategy.
Yeah. Well, that's quite a few different avenues that we can dive into. I want to go back to, we'll do a quick rundown. I think I would tell listeners, go to our first interview because we kind of really hit the carbon capture and the sequestration pretty hard. But those, like you said, are about to have some big announcements. And I think we do need to kind of cover like why that's important. And you did hit on, I think the most important thing is it, we were kind of holding on as a state and we got those kind of big projects and we're going to see the fruit of those, but kind of walk through somebody that might not know the differences between the two and why those are important for Wyoming's quote unquote legacy industries and how we can, you kind of already mentioned carbon products, so.
Yeah. So when we were trying to understand the energy strategy, before we had even started on the energy strategy, we called it phase 0 because we wanted to understand really what was happening in the energy sector in Wyoming, right? And when you look at Wyoming, it is an energy exporter. We export 90% of the energy produced ends up in a different state, in a different consumer base. Interestingly enough, natural gas into California is actually our most important in terms of money returned. Is our biggest geocommodity market, natural gas into California. The next biggest is coal into Texas. And if you might imagine, those two markets, California and Texas, are quite different, right? Natural gas and coal are quite different commodities, actually. They certainly have similar behaviors in terms of price performance, but there are different things, different beasts as well. But if you dig in terms of looking at consumption trends along those two product lines, it doesn't matter where the top 2 markets or the top 5 markets or top 10 markets, doesn't matter, is the wherever you are, there's a majority of consumers, whether it's an individual level or a corporate level, industrial level. The majority of consumers in those markets have an established demand for low emissions energy, and that it's increasing. Okay, so in California, it might not surprise you, it's something like 80%, right? 80% of people want low emissions energy. In Texas, it's much lower, but it's still majority. It's like 54% or so. So, and it doesn't matter where you look, it's a ubiquitous position that's what consumers want. And so that becomes a problem because Wyoming has a hydrocarbon-based energy economy, but we have to be cognizant that our consumers want low emissions energy. So the problem becomes and also they want another little compounding issue is that they want the energy in the form of electrons because of electric vehicles and things like that. So for Wyoming, our problem statement is, how does Wyoming take a resource base that is in the form of solids, liquids, and gases, and typically hydrocarbon-based, not always, but typically hydrocarbon-based liquids, solids, gases, and to continue to deliver that energy into markets that want decarbonized electricity.
Right.
So that's the problem, right? How do you do that? And that basically brings us down to the 3 big initiatives. carbon capture and utilization and storage is really the biggest opportunity in town for preserving the ability for our hydrocarbon resources to still access those markets. And we have to figure that out today. That's our number one deal. Is we have to deploy that technology today because tomorrow is too late.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one. It's also a bigger issue than just thermal coal, right? We have pursued CCUS for thermal coal for decades, and but that's not the problem, right? People don't want CCUS, they want low emissions energy. So CCUS can be used in many different ways. It's not just bolting it on to a coal-fired power station to scrub the CO2 in traditional sense, which we've pursued many times, but it's also things like hydrogen from natural gas, also needs carbon capture utilization storage. Even bioenergy with carbon capture utilization storage is viable in that context. So it's much broader, but we have to figure that one out today.
Yeah.
You take care of CCUS, then the hydrocarbon resources can still access the market. It also allows perhaps the one of the big three, natural gas, to continue to be relevant as well, because natural gas is an incredibly good feedstock for hydrogen production, provided you can do something with the CO2, right? So take care of the CCUS, and that allows hydrogen to become a big deal in the state and everything associated with it. Hydrogen is really interesting. If I'm anticipating your next question, hydrogen is really important because it does provide that ability to provide energy to our consumers in a form that satisfies that need, right? Decarbonize electricity. All right, electricity does not equal hydrogen, but hydrogen is readily converted to electricity. It's
right.
It's easy to transport. So that's why it's interesting. You can decarbonize it. You can do very interesting things with fuel cells. You can do very interesting things in terms of synthetic or synthesizing carbon-based products as well. So going into ethylenes and plastics and all sorts of fascinating stuff, provided you have zero emissions hydrogen. So anybody who reads a newspaper or checks the internet nowadays is probably almost certainly and has a passing interest in energy would have noticed a lot of things going on with hydrogen in the nation and globally, actually. And it's perhaps the greatest growth opportunity for energy sector in general that has been around for decades, right? It's the biggest opportunity of decades because it does give that opportunity for that hydrocarbon-based energy economy that characterizes Wyoming, many other nations, and everything else across the world. It is a pathway that can get us there without impacting our standard of living or the well-being of our citizens.
Right.
So that's the second one. Do CCUS first. That enables hydrogen, and in the back end, advanced nuclear comes in, and also that those same individuals who have a passing interest in energy would have also noticed there's a fair amount of interest in nuclear now, and it's growing. And that's simply because you're disregarding the very real and reasonable concerns around safety and spent fuel. Nuclear energy is incredibly high quality heat, high quality electricity with zero emissions. So that fits very, very well into a future economy where you need that. And if you have low emissions electricity right next to low emissions hydrogen, and you have excess CO2 in the system, then that opens up an enormous opportunity in terms of those synthesized products that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
And then you start to have zero emissions plastics, things like that. So,
wow.
Yeah, a lot of potential. Of course, a lot of capital required.
Yes.
So, but that's seems like doesn't seem to be a big issue at the moment. Both public and private forces are combining here and moving forward in the right way.
Right.
Which maybe it's Friday after, maybe there is beer in here because I'm just sort of rambling at the moment. But it's for somebody who's worked in the energy industry for a long time and has been working on these systems efficiencies and carbon mitigation, all that sort of story for a decade or more. Today is like Christmas every day because you're finally seeing all these players come together recognizing that something has to be done, right? They're seeing that it's a three-body problem: energy, environment, and economics, and they're all tackling this problem at the same time, trying to get it figured out. And it's very exciting time to be working in the energy sector.
Yeah, especially in Wyoming. I think, as you said, this is a great opportunity for us to kind of capitalize on, our resources that we have. A part of the
Also
strategy.
coal, right? It also,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, it's also coal, which sometimes gets ignored. The hydrogen opportunity, Wyoming has 25% of the nation's existing material feedstock for hydrogen production in the form of coal, natural gas, and renewable power. Okay. So hydrogen is a pathway to preserve our massive coal resource as well, which is sometimes lost in the noise. But I want to make that point on this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Following on that, so you're what is WEA's future for Wyoming, utilizing all these things? You kind of mentioned it, the energy future. And I've had some other energy guests on about, the oil field of the future, where we're combining all these different things together. Since we're a couple years now into the strategy, what you're kind of hitting on some manufacturing, some zero emission plastics. Is that kind of what we should be, what should be Wyoming's goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. It's if you look at the energy sector, and not just the energy sector in Wyoming, many of the other sectors are very, very primary resource based, very short, very linear value chains. Extract it, put on a rail car, and ship it to Texas. Right? That characterizes so many different parts of the Wyoming economy overall. The beef industry is the same. Forestry industry, the same. Right? There's very, very primary based. And so that means that there's very, very little opportunity for value add, which means that, even though we're exporting 200 plus million tons of coal, it's actually, in terms of return to the state, it's kind of miserly. It's not as much money as it should be. That's our resource, and why aren't we getting a lot more money for it?
Right.
The reason is we just ship it out of there and get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
So one big opportunity around this whole transformation is that you get beyond those simple linear value chains into a much more integrated system, right? And those integrating aspects are CO2 and hydrogen. If you incorporate those two molecules into that system, then you create mechanisms for the siloed resources to start working in a much more integrated system, and you get further and further and further up that value chain, and you get a lot more money back for the products that are coming out of the Wyoming's resource base. So things like, hydrogen is a value-added product for renewables and for natural gas.
Right.
Synthetic natural gas itself would be an added value-added property. Those low emissions plastics, for example, would be a very perfect example of that, which needs, you're talking about natural gas formed hydrogen, possibly the reformer powered by a renewable energy source, maybe a nuclear energy source. You're scrubbing the CO2 out, and you're either sequestering it, or you're actually maybe actually having direct air capture, and you're capturing CO2 and using that, bonding it with the hydrogen, and going up into that synthetic hydrocarbon chain as well.
Yeah.
And that's where the integration opportunity exists, and that's where the value is.
And it's sustainable, and it's as you were kind of mentioning, it's, could all be in Wyoming, that, and then, or out further. So, well, that's fascinating. So, with, you've mentioned the sequestering and the capture, and hopefully maybe we're going to have some bigger announcements. You mentioned maybe some uncommon techniques that might be coming around the corner. Are you able to kind of speak on that a little bit? And
yeah, well, I think I can only talk in general terms, but yeah, there's a ton. Like I said at the start, right? That request for proposal generated 17 proposals, and something in the order of $300 or $400 million worth of capital across those projects, and some of them were rather traditional, some of them were rather innovative, some of them were completely extremely innovative.
Yeah.
And the good thing about, we unfortunately we could only support a certain number of them, right? So
Sure.
there were projects that were really high quality projects, but we only have a certain amount of money and we can't support everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the infrastructure bill that's coming out of DC, I mentioned some of those big buckets, right?
Yep.
Large scale pilot programs, direct air capture programs, demonstration programs, and they're enormous. They're huge amounts of money. There's, just to give you an idea, there, some of the people listening might be aware of the Dry Fork Station up in there north of Gillette, and the integrated test center that's associated with it, and the carbon safe program up there.
Mm-hmm.
So at the ITC, there's a project run by MTR, and they got $65 million out of I think a total of $100 million pool on
Oh.
on a 3-year old DOE RFP for about $100 million for that technology. The infrastructure bill has another bucket of money coming for that same sort of model, right? Large scale pilot tests of capture technology. And instead of being $100 million, it's $1 billion.
Oh.
Right. So I remember there were only like 5 applications to that first one and they're now throwing 10 times the amount of money at it. So, any number of those proposals that we received could simply polish up their application and submit it into that
Into that pool.
out. And Wyoming, because we're going to get money perhaps from the ARP fund, could possibly, don't come back and tell me that I said I would.
Yeah.
We might be able to support in terms of cost share as well. So so at the same time, while it was disappointing that I can't support some of these RFPs, I'm looking forward to being able to support them in different ways and get some of those projects built out in the future through infrastructure money when it comes through.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and what you're saying, Glenn, is that potentially, a lot of people have to make decisions on the last ARPA, I think the ARPA funds, right? Is that what they're called? Through the state to, the state might be able to help.
Yeah,
as you're saying, a lot of people got to make that decision before that gets to your desk, I would imagine. Well, that's
of my pay grade.
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear that Wyoming's, keeping an, the WA and the state is keeping an eye on, how can we take advantage of some of these, federal buckets, as you said. Now, hydrogen, I think hydrogen's is getting more attention, I think, but is there any, have there been any projects or proposals that people of Wyoming should be aware of for, any sort of hydrogen technology?
Yeah, I have to be careful. But there last count I did, there were 9, about 9 or 10 proposed projects in development in the state, ranging from, in scale, anything between 100 million and 25 billion.
Okay.
So massive projects, huge. But the ones that we can talk about, some of them that we've supported, like mentioned earlier, the Black Hills project. They're working with Tallgrass. Tallgrass has a natural gas hydrogen project based around Douglas, I believe, and it's supported by the DOE. Williams companies have been very open about their intentions with respect to hydrogen, so they have a couple of projects in the works. And then there's a couple coming that we're close to be able to announce and talk about, maybe only a week or two, probably.
Oh, nice.
Another blue hydrogen project that's underway, and there's a very large sequestration project that is looking good as well. And then there's another hydrogen project under development, shaping up for pursuit with this infrastructure money. So, there's a lot coming, and I don't want to rain on the parade of the advanced nuclear. The advanced nuclear story is awesome, and it's amazing. We're really excited about it, right?
Yeah.
But personally, there's a boatload more happening right now with respect to hydrogen. Hydrogen is far more now than the nuclear is. There's more projects in development. The timeline is shorter, and that's actually where most of my interest is spent. I certainly do everything I can to support the nuclear side as well, but there's a lot of interest and a lot of activity in the hydrogen space.
Yeah, and let's talk about the Black Hills one. I feel like that one's probably the one we could probably talk about the most. Walk us through what that project is, because I think that, as you said, I think that's the most relevant. I think that's the one that, you know, actually can happen now.
Yep. And so it's associated with the Tallgrass project. So I'll talk about it in kind of collective terms here.
Yes.
So yeah, Tallgrass have that project with the DOE. They're going to do, I can't remember the details, and I'll be careful, and I don't want Tallgrass to call me up and say I misspoke. But so I think it's based around Douglas, and they're going to do that blue hydrogen, so natural gas based. I think the test might actually be gray hydrogen, so they're not going to do the capture just yet as they figure that piece out.
Sure.
But Black Hills is partnering with General Electric, and Tallgrass is a partner on that one, and they're investigating the ability for their they have some natural gas combined cycle systems, backup power, baseline power in Cheyenne, and they're going to test to see whether those turbines can run on a blend of natural gas with hydrogen. And they also, the intent, because it's based out of Cheyenne, there's a ton of natural wind power in the same area, right? So there's potential to switch back to either blue or green. Doesn't really matter. It's going to be clean hydrogen ultimately, and they're going to do a co-fired system there. So it's challenging because if you fire something with hydrogen, things have a tendency to get really, really hot, and there are associated challenges there. The hotter the turbine runs, the more issue you have potentially with NOx and SOx, so nitrous oxides and things like that. But it's an engineering challenge, which is why having GE on the partnership is incredible, right? Because I used to work for GE, and I love the company, and there's no company better in the world at building turbines. So it's an amazing partnership. We're really excited to see them be successful with that one, and also grow beyond that. You know, take it to the next level and deploy.
Yeah, you know, I think you mentioned GE and your time there, and I think that's where Wyoming needs to see this potential. If this project goes off, you know, flawlessly, and GE figures it out, I mean, that's a global issue there, where now, like you said, we can provide hydrogen, and then, you know, GE's figured out, well, we can run power with hydrogen. And then if people have the ability, like you said, mix it with renewable energy, and and so, now we're in the sustainable talk. But
that's right. Yeah, and it's the same thing. Like, with nuclear, it's the world's everybody and globally is watching what's happening in Wyoming with respect to advanced reactors and molten salt, fast breeder reactors and things like that, because it hasn't been done the way it's been done,
right,
or has not been done anywhere, and people are watching. Same thing with this with the Black Hills GE project, is that work will inform global markets and on how this actually works or not. So that's again, at the start it said, people are watching what's going on in Wyoming, and with positive view, right? They want to see us be successful. They think that what we're trying to do is bold, and it's the way to move forward. And getting a lot of support, not only from neighboring states, but DC and various federal agencies are all trying to help us along, and it's good. So we're not fighting this in a vacuum all alone, which would be a disaster, because Wyoming's tiny, right, in the grander scheme of things.
Yep.
We don't have the capacity to do this alone, and it looks like we're not going to have to. There's going to be plenty of support coming from private and public entities.
That's great to hear, because we had mentioned, I think you said we have the ability, what was it, 25% due to our carbon, coal, and natural gas and oil, we can supply in the States. And then our two biggest clients are Texas and California. So it's great to hear that we've got major support.
Yeah.
That's fascinating with hydrogen. That, you know, like you said, that is something I'm going to keep an eye on, because that is something that could be, you know, if they figure it out, that's, you know, a game changer quickly. Let's talk about, you know, because the big story, like you said, the big story is the nuclear plant down there in Kemmer. And it's a new, as you've mentioned, it's a new reactor. And I know you're probably not an expert on it, but walk through, you know, why it's different, you know, why, you know, some of the myths of the old way reactors used to go. You know, they claim that this new system is going to be safer and, you know, more environmentally friendly. And then any other benefits that comes with it for that area of Wyoming, because it's going to be in Kemmer next to, I'm not sure what that power plant's called, but
yeah. So you're right. I'm a geologist, right? Not a nuclear engineer. So but let me have a swing at it.
Yes.
So the big difference is really the scale. So the you know, the big golden age of nuclear development was in the 70s ish, I guess, and they built these big light water reactors all over the country, and they've got very good at it. But one thing that characterizes them is that they're huge, they're enormous, and the reason they went really, really big is that that's how they got the cost per megawatt down. Right, go for economies of scale, and you know, cost per megawatt is lower. So that's one big difference. The new reactors are smaller, and TerraPower, the Natrium reactor, has a faceplate or nameplate capacity of around 350 megawatts electric. And then they have, what is innovative is that it runs in a molten salt system, so they can actually heat the salt and store it in a vessel, I assume, and they can draw the heat off that molten salt if they need to boost the energy output at any one point of time. They run that through a heat exchange and boost the turbine. So they have the ability. It's almost like a battery in some ways, where they can draw on extra capacity. So that's the innovative piece, right?
Gotcha.
The physics, though, is decades old. This fast breeder approach and everything else has been, and molten salt reactors have been around from the 60s through the 80s. There was a test reactor at Idaho National Labs which ran for, you know, a long time to test these things. So the physics are not new. Even the reactor design itself is not really new. The manufacturing and everything else is new, sure, but the actual how does this thing work is not really new. And then that battery piece is new. So this breeder reactor type, they talk about things called passive safety. And again, I'm a geologist, right? So don't quote me.
Yep.
The way it's been explained to me is that the older reactors, light water reactors, the operators are kind of in a constant effort to control what is happening. They're trying to keep the reaction at a certain level, and they're actively doing it. And they have to have active cooling systems. So they're actively pumping water through the system to take excess heat away. They have to actively shut it down by pulling out fuel rods, things like that. The new designs have a complete paradigm shift in the way that is designed, so that the operators are constantly working to actually have a reaction. And so the old guys, they're trying to control the reaction. The new models, they're trying to actually make a reaction initiate, and so that everything becomes passive. And again, it's been explained to me so that if, for example, the operators just stood up out of their chairs and walked off and everything and hands off things, eventually the reactor would just shut itself down. If the cooling system, and it's passively cooled, so it's basically a circulatory system. But if that shut down, the reaction would also shut down. Something called reactivity. What is it? The negative coefficient of thermal temperature reactivity. So, and again, geologist, not too bad, eh? Not too bad for a geologist.
That's good. No, you're doing great.
So what that means is that as it gets hotter, the reaction drops off. And some of the physics behind that are pretty simple. As it gets hotter, it expands volumetrically, like, you know, air expands as well. Consequently, the density decreases. and the neutrons are not hitting so many, and the reaction just sort of collapses.
Gotcha.
And then things like simple things like having alloy plugs at the bottom of them that it reaches a certain temperature, the plug dissolves, or the reaction just flows out and disperses. Really simple designs, but just inherently safe, right? So the cooling system can shut down. What happens? The reaction shut down. Okay, the operators get fired and they all walk off the job and go and play golf. What happens? The reaction shuts down. And so it's a very interesting way that they design these things.
Yeah. Well, and that,
yeah.
I think how you described it, you know, the you know, the 70s way was, you know, size and power and you know, having coolants. And I think that's the best way to describe it, is they're trying to control it. Whereas now we've kind of learned from that of it's easier just if we leave it alone, then it just passively shuts off.
Yep.
And yep.
Yep. So the modern why they're so small, right? And Natrium is actually one of the bigger designs nowadays. At 350 electric is one of the larger designs.
Right,
Everything
right.
else is actually smaller than that. And the reason they're doing that is that you mentioned that they in the past they went big for economies of scale, right? That was how they did it. In the future, they want to go more towards the manufacturing efficiency. So they build the same reactor over and over and over and over and over again.
Gotcha.
And the Model T Ford approach, right? And get the cost down that way. So these are almost standardized reactor systems that they just build many of them. And we're talking like some of the models, the business models we've seen, they're talking about building hundreds, perhaps even thousands of them.
Wow.
And it's incredible. Some of the tech that we've seen have been shown is that you could have some of the reactor designs would fit in the back of your F-150 and run for 10 years, right? And
Wow.
the idea is that they ship it out there, they plant it on site, it generates, I can't remember the system, I think that model is like 200 kilowatts or something.
Sure.
And it does that continuously, passively for 10 years. And then they back a truck up and pick it up and take it back and refurbish it, refuel it, and ship it out again.
Wow.
So, and then everything in between is up for consideration as well.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, really, really fun topic to get deep on.
Yeah.
Really cool.
You know, when you said manufacturing, I went a different direction. So I see what they mean by that, you know, being completely scalable from large 350 to all the way to a vehicle. Wow, that's crazy.
It is really crazy when you get into some of the stuff. It just is like mind blowing.
Yeah.
Creativity of thought about some of these things is just incredible at the moment.
How does you know, this would be long term, and these will kind of be my last couple questions for you. You know, I think I asked you this last time, but you know, now we've got the blue hydrogen going, the carbon capture and sequester projects are really rolling, and even can get more steam if the federal infrastructure stuff comes through. But you know, for this year, especially with the Craig report, it is kind of due to supply and demand. You know, prices are back up, but for this year, Glenn, what do you expect to see from Wyoming's energy? And then you know, in 5-10 years, you know, what are kind of your goals for Wyoming on these topics we've kind of hit on today?
Yeah. So yeah, the Craig report is interesting, and it's fascinating to watch, right? Especially if you get into a conversation about why those prices are going up, it's kind of interesting as well. But let's not go there today. In the short, it's things are looking much better, right? And you even see you're watching what's happening through the legislature and the Joint Appropriations Committee. It's a whole things have changed. You know, they've spent the last 3 or 4 or 5 years just fighting, you know, and trying to find ways to have sustainable expenditure at the state level.
Yes.
And last year got pretty brutal, right? Where the year before it got really brutal.
Yep.
And then now things seems to be a little bit perkier. And you know, I do not envy a legislator. They have the hardest job in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, it does seem like they've turned a page, and people are starting to look forward now a bit more and not be so defensive because they have that opportunity, right? They have the opportunity with a lot of transformative sort of ideas coming into the state, transformative products and projects. There's a little bit of health in the budget, so they can actually invest. a bit more. Have other money like the ARP money and then potentially infrastructure money. So things are looking better. So this year, I expect a lot of announcements. There'll be a lot of new projects announced this year. Everything from carbon, I suspect sequestration,
Yeah.
not necessarily capture, but sequestration certainly. There'll be a bunch of hydrogen announcements for sure. And there's possibility you'll hear some more interesting nuclear announcements,
Okay.
maybe. Um, there'll be things like rare earth elements. There'll be another things, critical minerals. There should be some good stuff. So yeah, it'll be a news heavy year, I think.
Yeah.
And there'll be a lot of effort at the state level. What are we going to be doing? We're going to be working our tails off trying to, we've got the strategy. Okay, that's behind us. It's a
Yep.
good base. That's a foundation, right? Now let's get these initiatives going. Let's make sure these projects and these project proposals are successful. Let's make sure that we as a state are successful with infrastructure money, and that we don't let those opportunities slip through the cracks. So
Right.
that's what we're going to be working on. Even longer term, 5 years, same thing I told you last year. Wyoming's going to be great. It's going to be fine. Um, Not saying that it's not going to be tough at times, right?
Right.
This is a transformation. It's going to be some days that it's like, ugh, back to the grindstone again. And there'll be certainly more bad news coming as well. But
Hmm.
longer term, if we keep following this vision of to transform the energy economy, let's grab hold of these opportunities and go hard at them. Wyoming's in good shape, and I suspect we'll do just fine.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to hear that, you know, that foundation set, and then, that the legislators and I congratulate them and the governor about, like you said, turning the page. We're still using our legacy industries, but now, like, it's time to, like you said, this is the year for, getting those announcements out, get those projects in. Let's start getting to work on some of this innovative tech. Um, oh shoot, just had a question and then I lost it. Oh, for people that maybe have concerns, or they have some questions on some of these announcements that might be coming out. The WEA is pretty involved on almost many of these projects, so they can reach out to your guys' office, correct? And I
Absolutely.
wouldn't recommend maybe calling you guys up, but they can come and ask questions and get some concerns, yes, from your guys' office.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is, we are not a proponent. We do the best we can to be credible and impartial.
Mm,
So we'll tell you the good and the bad of anything that's going on, and not sugarcoat things either. Just like I said about the future, right? The
yeah,
future is going to be fine, but we're going to have some pain on the ways. Um, I'm not going to hide anything from you. I mentioned also about nuclear, right? There are some very real and very reasonable concerns about safety and other things, and that's fair to ask that question. And we might not be the expert, but we can find the experts to answer your questions directly,
yeah,
and do a lot of that with outreach. We had a nuclear 101 webinar, whatever that was, last month. So we try to do that role, and yeah, so feel free, and yeah, go ahead and call me. I don't mind.
yeah.
It's okay. Leave me an email, leave me a voice message. That's why we're here.
Yep, that's the mission. And as you mentioned, I think, get on your guys' website, and you guys have a newsletter too about,
Yeah,
you guys did a nuclear 101, let's
yeah,
brush up on a little bit of the physics and the science. You know, um, and like you mentioned throughout this interview, the nuclear got all the press, but really our eyes should be on maybe hydrogen. If some dominoes really fall there, like that could be, a game changer.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, just in case anybody who's a big nuclear fan is out there, I'm a big fan of it as well. What I'm trying to say is that there's other stuff which is just as big, just as interesting, just as
Mm.
cool, and it's happening now.
Yeah.
It's not in 7 years. So that nuclear opportunity is incredible, and we're going to do everything we can for help them be successful as well.
Yep.
But yeah, keep keep reading the newspaper. There's going to be some good stuff coming.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Glenn, we're almost at an hour. I do want to let you have an opportunity. Do you guys have any events coming up for the beginning of the year or webinars?
Yeah, we will be. No, so the very early stage will be busy, right? There's a lot of planning and stuff going on. There's the budget session starting. One thing we do intend to put together, maybe towards the we're probably looking at second quarter now. So, spring, early summer would be to hold or convene a conference. I don't know what the name of it would be, but it will bring the industry people that are actually talking and doing a lot of these projects, whether it's nuclear, hydrogen, CCUS, whatever it is, bring them all together to present on their projects, do a little bit of facilitated networking and everything else. It will absolutely be a public meeting. It'll probably be very, very cheap. It's, we'll probably have to charge a little bit, but we want to have promote participation in this event. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. We haven't figured it out yet, but keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah, it's tough getting all those people together and coordinating. After COVID, everyone's running conferences and running.
Sure.
Well, that's great to hear. My last question, because you brought it up, and that was my question I forgot earlier. Is there anything in the legislation in the legislature coming up that you don't have to say if you support or against it, but just some things you guys are keeping an eye on that people aren't really aware of?
Not so much. I mean, it is a budget session, so that'll dominate everything. There will certainly be bills hit the floor, but I'm not really aware of what's coming down that path. I'd keep an eye out very much on the American Recovery Plan Act funding. That will be dispersed consequent to actions in the legislature. So yeah, budget, obviously, ARP money's secondly, certainly. And then, I'm not sure what else is going to hit the floor.
That's usually a good thing. If there's nothing on your radar, that means they're focused on the budget, hopefully.
Yeah. I wouldn't hold my breath, but I'm sure there'll be something I have to go at. But we'll see about that when it comes.
Good. Well, awesome. Well, perfect. Well, Glenn, thanks for your time again. It's always great to get your information, and you're always good to listen to. And people should reach out to you if they have questions or concerns. And the Wyoming Energy Authority. Stay warm down there. It's that late winter season here in Wyoming, so everyone stay warm. So
you bet. It's always a pleasure, Aaron. So maybe we'll make this an annual thing. I'll come back again next year.
Yeah, I'd love that. I think it's good for Wyoming, for all our industries and everything like that, to always be up to date what's going on. So absolutely, Glenn. And if maybe we'll catch you at the session or maybe the conference in the spring if that comes to fruition. So we'd love to be there.
Hope so. Yeah, it'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Glenn. Thanks for your time on a Friday, and we'll catch everyone next time.
All right. Thanks, mate. Take it easy.
Yep. You too.
Bye.